What's the most messed up thing you've seen at work? I worked at a very large bank, and a very nice old lady had been in the hospital after hurting her hip, and then battling a condition that resulted from that injury. During that time, her bills that were on autopay overdrafted her account several times until the autopay system canceled. As you might imagine, there were overdraft fees. Each overdraft fee, about $35, also triggered another overdraft fee plus another $35, and then that fee triggered what's called an extended overdraft fee plus an additional $35. When she finally called and got me on the phone, she had over $635 in overdraft fees on top of a negative balance from the bills that had overdrawn her account. So let's call her Grace. Grace was a retired teacher for 45 years. She had an account with the bank for over 50 years. Grace had very small lifetime savings of just over $100,000 and a small monthly pension from her deceased husband. She was basically pleading on the phone for us to help her. She promised to cover the negative balance but asked that we waive the overdraft fees. I was 100% invested in helping her. I attempted to refund as many fees as I could, but I was limited to only about $200 of the fees. I went to my manager, who had more authority, with the same story. The first question out of his mouth was something they always asked. How much money does she have with us? As if someone who didn't have much money didn't deserve a fee refund as much as someone who has millions. Just over $100,000, I said. He sighed, looked over the account, then said, I don't see us waiving any more fees. And I said, but sir, she had her accounts with us for over 50 years. The manager then sent the request up to our unit manager. She came back, declining the fees. Why? Household balance does not support fee refunds. I was freaking livid. So I got back on the phone and told Grace that if she covered the entire negative balance, including the remaining fees, to avoid more overdraft fees, then I would work on getting her money back. I worked with another conspiring coworker to use our new monthly fee quotas to refund more fees for Grace until we managed to refund them all. When I called her back, she was elated. She thanked me profusely for helping her through her struggle. Several weeks later, my coworker and I were walked into a meeting room by security. We were fired for quote-unquote attendance violations, which we apparently accumulated for being 3 minutes late from break or lunch. All of this started only a few days after we helped Grace. I am very punctual and know for a fact that those time entries were manipulated by my manager, but there was zero recourse for me. The best part is that I got hired at another financial institution that actually loved my story of helping Grace because they actually care about their customers. So when they say that money makes the world go round, I always ask and wonder, but for whom? That's three people's worlds just turned upside down because of greed. Story 2. When I was in high school, I worked the overnight shift at a Jack in the Box on 16th Street in Van Buren in Phoenix, Arizona. This was in the late 80s, so if you're from there, you know how bad it was back then, and maybe even now. I don't live there anymore. One night, around some unspecified hour, two guys were in the drive-thru waiting for their food. The wait wasn't any longer than usual, and they didn't seem bothered. The Hispanic guy behind them, though, was super impatient, laying on his horn for no apparent reason. Eventually, he must have let his foot off the brake. His car rolled forward, and he tapped the new-looking car in front of him. The two guys got out of their car, walked back, leaned on either side of his vehicle, and roughed him up. After that, the two guys came back to the window, got their food, and left without a word. The Hispanic guy drove up to the window, obviously disoriented. There was a young dude in the parking lot who worked at the Jack in the Box but wasn't scheduled that night. He was just hanging out. This kid got between the Hispanic guy and the drive-thru window and said, "Now give me my $20. The man who had just been roughed up handed over $20. Why he didn't just, in the words of Bill Hicks, step on the gas, I'll never know. The shift manager went to the window and said, "Now give me my $20. Again, the man handed over the cash. The shift manager looked at me, smiling, and said, "Hey ma'am, do you want $20? I was floored, not wanting to victimize the guy any further, and yeah, I know he started it, but still, and naively believing that the police would probably show up. Spoiler, they didn't. I said, "Nah man, I'm good." The shift manager threw a few frozen tacos in a bag without cooking them. The Hispanic guy was saying, "Are we cool? Are we cool?" The shift manager tossed the frozen tacos onto the man's lap, yelling, "Get the hell out of here." The man drove away, and as he did, I noticed that his license plate bore a handicap insignia. Story 3. When I worked at a bar, an incident occurred where an 8-month pregnant manager had a bar stool thrown in her direction while trying to break up a fight from afar. Thankfully, the baby was okay, and now he's happy and healthy. Additionally, there was an alarming situation of somebody chasing another person in their truck after a fight in the parking lot, which escalated during the altercation. Transitioning to my experience at a grocery store, there were disturbing discoveries, including a hollowed out cucumber found in the trash can and a toilet smashed to pieces. Moving on to my employment at a car dealership, there weren't many incidents besides encountering prejudiced customers. However, my mom, who also worked at the same dealership, had a traumatic experience. The coworker, an elderly woman possibly in her early 80s, had no one to be contacted about with her passing. The funeral was arranged by the office, with them being the sole attendees, highlighting the loneliness the woman probably experienced. In my role in pediatric home health, I witnessed instances of neglect. The company was acquired, and the new ownership urged me to hire nurses with blemishes on their licensing records, such as stolen substances or DUIs. I made the decision to leave shortly after. Despite not hiring them myself, the process was underway when I departed. It troubled me a lot as I couldn't, in good conscience, allow individuals with such histories to take care for disabled children alone. And then transitioning to my experience in hospice, I encountered heartbreaking situations where families refused to administer comfort medication to their loved ones on hospice because of fear of dependence. Additionally, it was disheartening to witness young individuals in their 20s and 30s passing away due to inadequate preventive health care. The limitations of Medicaid exacerbate the issue, though it covers hospice care entirely. Furthermore, state-run nursing facilities were revealed to be unsuitable options due to reports of bed bugs and neglect stemming from insufficient staffing levels. It's a stark reminder to avoid such facilities if possible when considering care for a loved one. Alright, so the hollowed-out cucumber cracked me up, and the ones about the pediatric home and hospice made me realize how scary it really is to be both young and old and without enough love and care from others. Story 4. Hospital security. A mental health patient was brought in the day he became an adult by his mom. He was autistic and disabled with a feeding tube. The mom lied to get him to a one-on-one facility, but he was really 321, so he was transferred here. He had to wear nappies and could not stand being touched. He was more chimp than human, though he could at least feed himself. Occasionally, he would charge at the staff, so I was tasked with watching him. I couldn't let him leave the room. Body posture was the only way to convey that. In the camera office, I ranted against the RNs who questioned what kind of mother could abandon their child. I asked if raising him for 18 years would make them beg for anything other than release. After several days, the patient became irate. I scrolled through the security report as I watched him, hoping to see a change in behavior or trigger. Everything, including everyone going in and out and actions like medicine and food delivery, was recorded. Nothing mentioned food or water, barely any medical staff visits. I notified the charge RN, who checked her own records. He hadn't been fed or given water since he got there a few days ago. Then they discovered he had a child-sized stomach feeding tube that, as an adult hospital, they didn't have the right size for. A RN had to drive to a children's hospital to acquire it. A few hours later, the ER doctor required a hands-on exam. I half opened the door to try and give some comfort. I held his hand in gloves and scratch sleeves, but after a minute he gestured me to pet his head like a dog. It calmed him, it greatly upset me. The little self-awareness he had and all it gave him was the ability to suffer and some minor comfort of being pet to alleviate it. I quit about a week later. Story 5. I used to work as a customer service agent on chat for a clothing company. The target market was classy European millennials. I usually dealt with queries regarding returns, missing items, delays in shipping, etc. We also had a phone line if customers wished to speak with us via phone instead. One day, I logged into the system and picked up the first chat that came through. I could see that this person had contacted us before and was now requesting an urgent callback. They had sent multiple pictures before and spoken with different agents in the past, but I hadn't scrolled up to see what it was about exactly. Before I called them back, I decided to load these pictures. They were displaying as blurry rectangles on the side, so we had to tap on them to load them in to see what they were being so urgent about. What I saw was a collection of really spicy and bizarre photos. So apparently this person was a known creep who had just been sending this stuff to the chat for ages. It was my first month at that job and I was shocked, but my coworkers didn't even flinch. I learned pretty soon that at a call center customer service chat job, your skin thickens pretty quickly. Another messed up incident was a person reporting receiving the wrong item after placing an order online. The lady ordered a summer dress in the online sale but received fluid samples fully packed in our branded box, etc. I had no idea how to explain that to the customer, but honestly, my best bet was that someone in the warehouse finally had a mental breakdown. I obviously didn't tell her that. All I could do was tell her to dispose of it as soon as possible, and the best part of it was that this poor lady asked if she could swap it in the physical store for the item that she actually ordered. Holy crap, that's wild. Looks like it goes both ways. Crazy customer with wild content and chats, and then customers receiving even wilder quote unquote content from warehouse employees. Story 6. I worked in search and rescue almost 10 years ago. We entered a building in an area that had been recently shelled quite heavily, and it was in rough shape. The apartments on the lower levels had been completely shredded, and while the upstairs apartments looked okay on the inside, there were huge cracks in the walls and floors of the building. Everything you touched or stepped on erupted in a cloud of dust. The power was out, the plumbing was shot with leaks all over the place, and the people inside needed to relocate somewhere safe. We could hear screaming from, I think, the third floor, but as we moved upwards, it was getting fainter and fainter, gradually reducing into a kind of wailing and sobbing sound. We eventually found the apartment it was coming from, and on the other side of the door was a kid crouched under a table, hands over his ears, and a mess everywhere. We had no idea what to expect. Then we went around the corner into the kitchen and found the mother. She was on the floor, still weakly sobbing with both of her hands injured. She was trying to clutch her stumps with some bed sheets and an old towel. Her injuries had nothing to do with her direct exposure to the conflict. Her husband had allegedly caught her with evidence of infidelity, hurt her, and then fled the scene. He had been radicalized by local extremist groups, and as soon as the situation in the city turned truly ugly, he left her there. I hope he got worse than she did in the end. Story 7. Not totally messed up, but I was working late and I walked away from my desk to talk to someone at their desk across the office. My girlfriend at that time had made me cookies, which I had on my desk. The only other person there was the janitor who, when he got to my desk, just started eating my cookies. At that same office, another late night, I heard chunk, 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 and I looked over at our break room, and this same janitor was collecting the free soft drinks. We had a vending machine that took no money and putting them into his janitor cart. We set up a video camera to record the room, and the next night, he did the same exact thing, and we showed HR this. He was replaced by another janitor. I changed jobs, and my new office was a few blocks away. And one night, I'm working late, and sure enough, that same guy shows up to clean this office. There were also 2 incidents that occurred at 2 different Walmart grocery distribution centers when I worked there. In the first place, they were wheeling an inventory control coworker of mine to an ambulance. A forklift operator had run through an intersection on the dry grocery side and injured her leg. She almost didn't make it to the hospital. The second incident involved a banana room door that came down quickly, allowing lifts to go through or employees to walk in. It came down and injured a quality control employee. An investigation revealed that the doors company-wide were installed incorrectly. The worst incident I heard about was at the West Point plant in Chipley, Florida. An employee had an injured arm because of a comforter machine. Seriously though, these stories range from completely bizarre to just downright dangerous. And if you have your own workplace incident you'd like to share, please don't forget to comment that down below, and also please like and subscribe while you're at it on this channel. It really helps me to keep going, and for sure it helps keep the channel going too. And also be part of the community and don't miss another upload as we go on to the rest of the stories in this video. Here's story 8. I worked at a vet's office as a veterinary technician. We served a lower privileged area, and unfortunately, that meant a lot of the animals we saw were not taken care of as they should have been, whether intentionally or not. There was one dog who was not older than 2 years, but she looked like a senior dog of 15 plus years due to the amount of damage. Anyway, that wasn't the main problem. The owner was a middle-aged man who looked like he couldn't care less about his dog. However, he said the dog barked all the time and smelled terrible, so his wife made him bring it in. We took the dog back, and he was right, she smelled terrible. We then noticed a spot on her shoulder, so we ended up shaving the fur and saw that she had a skin condition. The pain that poor dog must have felt would have been unimaginable. We knew she was beyond help. The owner didn't want to pay for treatment and said he would take care of it at home. I then heard him on the phone in the other room saying unspeakable things. I told my veterinarian, who was already horrified and wanted to call animal control. Anyway, we pretended the dog had passed away, the owner left, and we knew the poor thing was beyond help, so we gave her food and pain medication and put her to sleep. Rest easy, puppy. Story 9. The patient comes into the ER and gets a full workup. His chemistries are all messed up. He required a manual white cell count because his count was so high the analyzer basically said, "What the hell?" His output was full of white cells and bacteria. You know, your classic old person UTI that's gone extreme. We figure he's going to be admitted. Nope, they sent him home. Mind you, this was not a case of patient left AMA against medical advice. This was just the doctor saying, "Yeah, it seems like you've got a UTI. Go home and drink some cranberry juice." 2 days later, the same patient comes in with the same complaint and gets the same lab tests. While I'm doing the manual white cell count, the phone rings. It's the reference lab down the street. The cultures on the patient I'm currently working on from 2 days prior have come up positive. I take the notification and call the ER to let them know. Us labbies figure he's going to be admitted for sure this time. Come to find out, they sent him home again. Again, not an AMA, but a go home and drink some cranberry juice. Story 10. I worked at a company of about 28 people where partner number 1 passed away in our largest client's corporate jet incident. And then 10 months later, partner number 2 and president were caught by his wife involved with an account executive, checked into a hotel with a pint of Rocky Road ice cream, a bottle of champagne, and a snub-nosed 38 and did the predictable thing. In truth, it was one of 4 different affairs in an office of 28 people. That meant more than one person in every 3 was involved with one another, and by the way, I wasn't one of them. Partner number 3 came out of 6 months of therapy to take over the helm of the shop. True to form, for people who go through therapy, he thought everybody should go through a 12-step program. So he bussed us all up to a mountaintop in the middle of January to talk about our feelings and do trust exercises. After that, he started firing employees who had manned their posts while he was in therapy. I wasn't one of them, but I certainly didn't trust him with my career, all in a 2-year period. Story 11. I once provided care for a man with dementia, which often led to his being paranoid. His brother, an ex-police officer, was stealing from him. He would pick up his pension but steal about 10 to 20% of it each time. When the gentleman I cared for called his brother out on it, his brother would always blame his dementia for his suspicions and then guilt-trip him into apologizing for doubting him. Eventually, we were asked to collect his pension instead of his brother after his brother refused to provide a full paper trail of his pension and to deliver the money in the sealed envelope it's given in at the office. His brother kicked off big time trying to get us to stop providing care so he could keep exploiting him. We stood our ground, duty of care above all else, and our man got the pension he earned through his life in full. I saw lots of other messed up stuff in that job, but there's something about a man's older brother exploiting and emotionally gaslighting him that just hits hard. Yeah, family and money, those two rarely end up happy together for sure. Story 12. Coworkers, management, and their quote-unquote no big deal response. I was just out of high school. As I was leaving the break room and going down the stairs, one coworker was coming up the stairs. He pushed me and tried to move inappropriately. I did everything I could until I was able to get away. I ran to the front counter and immediately told the store manager. He said, "What do you expect? You work at a lumber yard." I quit. Nothing was ever done to the guy. The manager was later also accused of having control over 2 female employees at the same lumber yard. I didn't report my incident. I should have, but that was 30 years ago and I didn't know my worth or myself. I was a good kid and didn't want to make waves. 3 years later, that same guy's brother was arrested for offenses involving a local woman. I guess it runs in his family. Story 13. A lot has happened. I'm a paramedic. A lady rear-ended a log truck, resulting in harm to her son and his car seat. I had a forerunner roll over on the interstate. An older man and woman in the front seats were unresponsive. Their son, who was in the middle of the back seat, was injured. However, the 2 grandkids on either side only experienced minor injuries. One of the kids kept saying, "My dad is gone. Oh my God, can you please help my dad?" A man, a woman, and their son worked at the port nearby. The son worked as a medic at the port, the man drove forklifts, and the woman was a spotter. At one point, the man didn't know the woman was behind him, causing an accident involving the woman. The son had to be the first responder. He lost his mind. Story 14. I was sorting all the psych patients that were hospitalized in my state and came across this guy, a young adult or maybe a bit older, who got sent to the ward because he suddenly became aggressive. and started having episodes where he squirmed in pain and things like that. Before being hospitalized, he was complaining about these things, but nothing the medics did was working and nothing wrong was found, so it should be a psychiatric issue, right? Wrong. He was put in the ward for 2 or so years and lost a lot of his life being considered insane because he developed a rare spinal illness that was hard to detect. Really messed up. I don't remember what happened to him afterward, but I am not really optimistic that it had a happy ending. Alright, so suspense, horror, and drama? These stories are truly crazy. But wait, it doesn't stop there. For more, you can hop on over to Legendary Workplace Meltdown Stories and discover more epic tales from employees themselves. Story 1 and even the last story, all insane. I'll see you there, and thank you for watching this one.